Welcome to RPI's CloudSuite Tech Talk series. My name is Keith Whalen, and I'm here to introduce today's presentation on what to do if you're not quite ready for CloudSuite. Joining us today, we have Mr. Ken Foley and Mr. Richard Leigh Stout. Please note that we hold these sessions every Friday at noon Eastern, and if you're interested in our upcoming schedule, you can find it on the Work Out Loud events page. Also, know that we welcome questions. Simply type them into the QA chat box at the bottom of your screen, and we'll save them until the end of the session so as to not interrupt the flow of our presenters. And with that, I give you Mr. Ken Foley and Mr. Richard Leigh Stout.
All right. Thanks, Keith. Hello, my name is Richard Leigh Stout, and I'm joined today by RPI's Director of Lawson Technical Services, Mr. Ken Foley. In today's presentation,
Hi, everybody.
Hey, Ken. In today's presentation, we'll spotlight a topic often overshadowed but critically important, and that is an effective strategy for maintaining a top-performing on-prem Lawson environment. This should be of interest to anyone tasked with overseeing a Lawson system or support organization today, whether you're in the midst of an ERP migration or not. Our CloudSuite series has been focused on moving to multi-tenant Infor applications, but that leaves out a key consideration. That's maintaining Lawson and getting the most out of the on-premise solution as long as it is a production system, which in some cases might be 5 years or more as organizations consider their path forward to the next generation of enterprise applications. So today we'd like to focus on Lawson and review the key technical considerations and events coming up and offer a roadmap to navigate those events. Now, Ken, you run a managed services organization tasked with keeping Lawson servers in top shape across a variety of different platforms, versions, and client industries. I understand you and your team recently pulled together information on platform compatibility, end-of-life dates, and update considerations. I'd like to ask you about some of the key takeaways from that document, which you have made available as a download accompanying this presentation.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. Yeah, we've have regular support cadence calls with our managed services clients. And usually after an announcement from Infor about, a certain product release that's no longer going to be supported after a certain date, or a new component is, required, like an ADFS, to be configured into an environment in order to be supported, questions obviously start coming in about how long they have until they actually need to do the update or the installation. So as I was saying before, most recent examples, ADFS, they're required to have their environments configured for SSL. They need to stand up additional ADFS servers. Another example is LDAP signing recently with the Microsoft update. And now the announcement about Mingle 11 no longer being supported on-prem after March 1st of this year. So there's a lot of concerns, related to the clients needing to plan for these changes to their environment. They have to account for these in their budget. They have other projects that could be affected by these changes that are already underway, so they have to replan or whatever. So, we have to work with them on that. So what we decided to do is start being a little bit proactive about, doing some researching on these new requirements, changes, new releases, and, what their complexities are, compatibility matrix, what are the dependencies based on, if they have to update a certain component, how does that affect the other components and so forth. So we're putting together documents that will help guide them through this journey so they can put together a roadmap and plan.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Well, let's dig into some of those, starting with system updates. Ken, what are some upcoming support milestones for operating systems and databases that clients should be aware of?
Sure. So as you all know, Infor large ecosystem made up of a number of components, third-party software. And it's, challenging from a compatibility standpoint. So we have this very large document that Infor provides on Lawson compatibility, the whole matrix. And sometimes it's, it's difficult to navigate and figure things out. But based on what I've researched in terms of Microsoft products, we all know Windows Server 2012 R2, their extended support ends in October 2023. Infor recently came out with their latest release of LSF 11, and then they have a CU Customer Update 3 that is currently supporting Windows Server 2019. So in the matrix, just to keep in mind, I do not see 2016 supported. I see 2012 R2, and they jump immediately to 2019. We're going to ask additional questions about 2016 to Infor to verify. End of support for 2019 is scheduled for January 2024, but the extended support with Microsoft goes an extra 5 years. So like 2012 R2, that was extended to 2023. So you'd be in the same boat with 2019. So hopefully that'll be enough. You won't need a update further than that. In the matrix for Landmark, it's still showing that Landmark is supported up through Windows 2016. So we don't know what the plan is for 2019 as of yet. Extended support for 2016 ends in January 2027. So this will be in the document that we're attaching to this presentation. So, for most of our customers, you've been on SQL Server 2016, on Windows 2016. Others have recently migrated from SQL Server 2014, which was, end of this year, 2014 SP3. So folks right now are moving to 2016, and they can move to 2019 SQL Server on that latest release of LSF. For those of you on Unix, I've been talking about Windows here. For Unix and Linux, the current support dates for platforms that Infor currently supports, AIX 7.1 and 7.2, their dates go through 2023. On the Oracle database front, which many of you Unix clients use, you're mostly, I think, on 12C, but you may want to plan on upgrading to 19C, and that is required for version 10.0.11 on LSF. WebSphere, we may want to talk about, which is used for System Foundation, Landmark, LBI, MSCM. Java 7 is no longer going to be supported after July 2022. So you may want to think about moving to 8 there. I'll leave it at that.
Okay. That's a lot of information, and I appreciate you laying it out in the accompanying reference guide. I guess this is a great time for me to give a little bit of a disclaimer that this is the information that we have at the time. I encourage everyone to always grab the latest version of the lifecycle document, the compatibility matrix from the Infor support site. Infor is certainly the ones that are authoritative on the subject, not us. And if you have any questions or would like some clarification, do open a support ticket so you can get the answers to your questions documented from Infor. Now, that covers the sort of the operating system updates that we have coming up. What about the application level? So, keeping LSF and Landmark and, other Infor components up to date is really important. How up to date do clients need to be to enjoy the highest level of support from Infor? And what are the implications of slipping behind?
So Infor publishes a product lifecycle policy document that's attached to a KBA article that I have referenced in that document that you'll be able to download. The The latest version of that document was published in December, so I would frequently go to that article and check to see if there's been any updates. But the most recent's just in December, so it's pretty recent. Bottom line is they follow an N-2 policy. So N being the latest current release of the product. So N, the current release, and then the previous release are supported pretty much the same way, where if there's any bugs that come up that have to be addressed, P1 or P2 issue related, those are going to get addressed. Once you start getting beyond that and you're 2 versions behind, Infor is going to focus on P1 fixes. And that's, based on their policy. Obviously there would be certain cases where they may, provide fixes. So for example, we're going to get to this pretty soon about the new customer update process for LSF. A recent experience of ours was the regulatory updates. Infor originally came out suggesting that you needed to get to the CU update process in order to take on those new regulatory updates for this, 2020. They did agree to come out with the old style CTPs. So that's in process right now, just in case if any of you have questions about that. So the Infor, may decide, yes, we need to go beyond that N-2. But, with that said, if you do fall too far behind, unfortunately, issues may not get addressed that you run into. So their expectation is that you try to keep up, especially for you on-premise folks, to keep up with the latest and the greatest. You can also run into problems with third-party products, as we were talking about before, because Infor is going to release a new release. Sometimes because they need to stay in compliance with the third-party components. So if you don't keep up, your third-party components may not be supported any longer, and you would not be able to upgrade like an OS or whatever and have your Infor solution still work. So that's one of the implications you have to watch out for.
So you'd mentioned something about customer updates on the Lawson platform. This is new, right? I understand Infor shifted the update strategy for LSF to be more in line with the landmark CU model. So how does that work now?
Yeah, so as of, I guess we'll call it, it was ESP10. They're releasing product fixes and enhancements as customer updates. Information about this, so for version 10, there's a KB article, and then there's another one for version 9. So you should probably reference our document and then go out to the KB article and take a look to see what it's all about. But their plan is to release 4 customer updates per year, so quarterly pretty much. However, they're going to hold the possibility that there may be an emergency product fix that has to get released, so they may issue an emergency CU in the meantime. There's no longer going to be any, service packs post SP10. So everything's going to be delivered by this the new CU release. And in terms of requirements, Infor for Mingle 10.0.10 or 10.1.0 is going to be required to apply these CUs. And then also Design Studio.
Portal, right?
Portal, exactly.
Right.
It's what they would call Portal. Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah.
And also Design Studio. So if you currently use Design Studio, it's the same thing. You need to have at least 10.0.10 or some flavor of that, or 10.1.0 updated or installed. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
And speaking of that, what are the other component updates that clients should plan for?
Yeah. So the biggest thing that I've mentioned is 10.0.11, Lawson System Foundation with the latest customer update 3. It's now supporting Amazon Corretto, JDK 8. So for those of you concerned about the Oracle, charging for Java and all that, that may be an option for you if you decide to go to that release. It's also supported on Linux 7, Windows 2012 R2, and Windows 2019. So none of the AIX or HPUX, Solaris flavors of Unix. WebSphere Application Server 855 is no longer going to be supporting Java 7 after July 2022. So you'll need to think about moving to Java 8 prior. Also, WebSphere itself is going to be ending support December 31st, 2022. So we're going to need to keep an eye out. We haven't seen anything yet, from Infor, any announcements regarding WebSphere. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. But one thing I would mention about WebSphere, especially for those folks that have not yet configured LDAP-S, that you really should think about applying the latest fix pack for WebSphere 855, at least fix pack 16 we found. Otherwise, you may hit some performance issues with LDAP-S. So I wanted to call that out too.
Okay, well, you mentioned LDAP-S. I do think that one of the biggest challenges to running an on-premise Lawson environment today is staying up to date with security compliance. The Lawson ecosystem has a rich heritage. It's made up of many component parts, some of which were created during a whole different era of corporate IT security standards. How can clients keep the Lawson solution in compliance with organizational IT security requirements?
Definitely a challenge. I mean, I was a Lawson administrator back in the day, I was a customer. And I would have my IT security team coming to me, hey, certain, LSF, crazy stuff here. You need TLS, you got to take care of this, whatever. So what I would suggest is, be proactive. Work with your IT security team. They have a list of requirements. They put together their policy documents and so forth. They have tools that they go out, they do scans, they are looking for certain things. If they haven't, I'd be surprised if they haven't, but if they haven't, run scans on your Lawson ecosystem, have them do it. And, you guys can meet. They can provide you with details of what came back as results. It will be very specific in terms of what the, based on their requirements, what the suggested step is to rectify their finding or findings on those servers. And then at that point, you'll have to do some research on those components and then plan on, doing installations on lower environments and doing some thorough testing to make sure that those new updates are not affecting the solution and the services provided to your customers, internal customers. So I would go that way with it. This can include service configurations, access, account access, who's got, domain controller administration, who has access to certain directories on servers, file changes in source directories. They may be watching out for, you have your source directories in LSF and you update COBOL or whatever, and they get alerted, so things like that, you can certainly discuss with them. So it does come down to communication, working with your team, identifying the outliers that they want you to address, and then you have to, research and test and, make sure you can apply those updates without affecting things.
Yeah. That sounds like a monumental challenge, but one that should be addressed by working together with IT and your security professionals rather than versus. Mm-hmm. So moving on to desktop compatibility. As desktop operating systems and browsers and the Office suite continue to receive updates, what do Lawson clients need to be aware of to avoid any compatibility errors?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought this up, Richard, because we talk a lot about the server side of things, but there's components on the desktop workstation that we have to address too. So there's a few things to keep in mind when performing updates. So one, there are certain Lawson technology and application products that are dependent on the browser and version. Examples of this are Design Studio, Portal or Lawson for Infor Mingle, Requisition Center, Employee Self-Service, etc. There are other products dependent on your Office version, such as add-ins and Infor Spreadsheet Designer. So of course there are other stuff too on your desktop. Those of you know it, LID, Smart Office, Lawson Security Administrator, and other things that are dependent on your LSF version. So whenever you're planning on making updates, check out the compatibility matrix, see what's being supported, what browser versions, and so forth. Also test. And I know you have to keep in line, right, with, again, going back to your organization and what their standards are for desktop, Office versions, browsers, security configuration for your browsers. A lot of things can affect the performance and access to your Lawson system. So you got to keep in line with all that.
Yeah. Would you tell me about some of the other initiatives that clients should plan on tackling over the next few years to, address these concerns and maintain compatibility, maintain compliance?
Yep. Yeah. So for one, I remember ADFS when I first joined RPI with you, Richard. That was like the big thing, right? Announcement came out, late the previous year. You had to be updated, configured with ADFS by March, and so, and I'm finding it's interesting because I still have folks coming to us asking us to help them with ADFS to configure it. They stayed on either ESP9 or older and haven't gone to 10 or beyond, so they haven't addressed it. So that's one thing I would consider, because 10.09 is soon going to be N-3. So in order to be supported, you really should consider getting to at least 10 or going to 11 if you're going to make the effort. And in order to do so, you have to configure ADFS. So that's critical. And then we also have LDAP-S. And I know that Microsoft came out with this announcement early last year. I know there was some delays on that patch coming out and so forth, but I would certainly consider just get it done if you haven't done so already. There's going to be a little bit of effort there in terms of getting the appropriate certificates for AD and so forth, getting it configured. There's articles out there regarding LDAP-S and how to configure. So there's KB articles that you can review and address that. And then, of course, applying SSL configuration to your LSF and Landmark environments. There's other documents for that also, and part, the installation documents. And then, of course, I would suggest, because a lot of clients, fortunately, they'll come to us, we can't access our system. And it comes to be the fact that a certificate expired and it just wasn't addressed in time. a simple thing that you should be proactive about and avoid downtime because of something like this. So I would suggest performing a certificate review. Find out where all the certificates are, and we have something in our document that we've attached that lists out for your system foundation, landmark environments, where certs are. So, for example, web servers, your OS JDK, your WebSphere JDK, and you have that on all the the different LSF, landmark, MSCM, LBI. They're in all the systems. So if you're configured throughout for SSL, you're going to have a bunch of certificates to look at. And I know some of you might have self-signed certs for WebSphere, so they auto-regenerate, and that's great. Just note that. But there's a lot that, like IIS, you're installing manually if your certificate expires and you have to do an updated cert. So I would suggest that too, to review.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to get proactive there. That might be new to some organizations. I mean, the 20-plus year history of LSF, I think it's only been in recent times that the standard has been to secure every single channel of communication, and that's maybe introduced some certificates into the solution that clients might not even expect are necessarily there, or need to get renewed a certain amount of time after their original setup. Mm-hmm. Let's take a look at another important challenge to acknowledge here, and that's staffing. As Lawson system administrators retire or move on to other things, it's critical that organizations have a succession plan to keep a minimum required skill set in-house. And while there are professional service organizations like RPI that are available to handle system updates and day-to-day operations, we feel it's important that clients maintain ownership over their Lawson system. So what does that mean? What's a Lawson system owner?
Yeah, so with our managed services clients we have, there has to be somebody internal to the customer or the client that is responsible for the overall solution. As a professional services organization, the client is not going to provide us access to do security provisioning, right? We talked about IT security earlier on. They're not going to allow a third-party provider to handle account provisioning and maybe application access, but certainly not account provisioning. There's too much risk there. So they usually will want somebody internal to the customer handling that type of provisioning. They get audited on it, so they got to make sure, they're not going to tell the auditor, oh yeah, we have a professional services firm that handles that for us. That's not going to fly. Understanding other stuff like your integrations, we're going to talk about RICE in a little bit, I think, but really truly understanding the connection points and the data flows between your Lawson ecosystem and other solutions. Yes, RPI can definitely get up to speed. We do this for a lot of clients where we really get knowledgeable about them and their integrations and help support the issues or the integration, excuse me. But, when it really comes down to it, I think it's necessary that, you don't just give up all that, it's yours. It's your solution when it comes down to the end of it. It's your business. You could lose money on it if something goes wrong, right? So you have to, I really feel you need to understand it and not just give up the reins to a third party. Business process knowledge, yeah, we could certainly learn stuff, but no one knows the business like you guys do, right? Change management, managing us applying updates, throughout. there's so many dependencies within your organization. That's why, most of you probably have change management process in place. You have a change board. You have to submit a change in advance, at least a week, right? And you have to have a conversation with folks from other parts of the organization and in IT, so that you can get together, you can explain what you're changing in case there may be a dependency you haven't thought of, right? Why would you leave that to us to figure that out, right? So I think it's really important that you keep control of that. Now, can we be part of that? Yes, absolutely, because we could be a knowledge owner, subject matter expert of your Lawson solution, but we need to be engaged also with the rest of the team through you to properly manage the change and make sure that we're not affecting something else that we'll have no idea about, And the other thing is clients like us to help them with the mundane daily activity of maintaining the system, avoiding downtime and all that, so that they can focus on high value add project initiatives, right? So we can support you on those initiatives, based on, applying patches or whatever, or, notifying you of Infor updates that you need to be aware of and help guide you through that process of the updates. But in terms of business value, solutions, new installations or whatever, that really, makes sense to have you still involved in that. So that's my 2 cents,
Yeah.
Richard.
So it's still a very important role to maintain, even through staffing changes, or perhaps that role is no longer a full FTE, but
Right.
it's important to plan for.
And I should mention, I know we're not talking about CloudSuite, sorry to interrupt you, but we're not talking about CloudSuite right now. But earlier we did talk about that there is going to be a need for client engagement when or if they move to CloudSuite, right? There's still going to be a lot of technical activities that are the responsibility of the client, the customer. So just want to point that out too.
Yeah, common misconception that systems in the cloud administer themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, you're talking about sort of what kind of knowledge and control and responsibility sort of is really required, within the client organization that really can't be outsourced. A lot of organizations have developed a large portfolio of RISE components over the many years that Lawson's been in place. How can they ensure that these components can continue to be effectively supported and updated through staffing changes?
Well, I think the number one thing is document. Mm-hmm. So we hit this a bit where if we're going into a client, going to take over the support function, and we're doing knowledge transfer, there's many times where there's all these integrations, there's lists, but they're not well documented in terms of the inputs, outputs, what are the servers that are involved in those integrations and so forth. So I think the number one thing is to document. Now, talking about lists, let's go back. Let's catalog what's out there, right? Because there may be things that you don't even know that are out there. So let's catalog all those components, and then try to get some semblance of documentation in place so we have a good understanding of what's the components, what's the flow, what's the process, through the integration. So from what's the source system, how's that, data extracted, how is it transferred, how is it loaded, what's the program that's processing it on the target system, whatever, right? Could be an IPA flow, could be an old COBOL program. Could be a Lawson delivered conversion or interface program that's used. Where's the reports go after, right? When the process is done, who's validating the data as that integration is completed, and so forth. So I think documenting is key, and then based on that and knowing the components, how something's architected, then you can get into dependencies. What are the technologies that are supporting that? And all those things that we were talking about before, components, WebSphere, Java, whatever, are any of those, if we update that, does that break your integration, right? And you're not going to know that until you know how it's put together, how it's architected, what technology is supporting it. So we know what the dependencies are, so we can address it, before we do any updates. I hope that answers that.
No, I think it does, because what I'm hearing is now's the time. If you're not confident in your documentation library, sort of now's the time to correct that. And I mean, you mentioned sort of business process alignment. It's not only should you document the how does this stuff work, but the why as well, right? The business justification, and that will help you, as you look to migrate to a new enterprise application, whether that's CloudSuite or something else. This information will help surface unique requirements that would need to be met in that next generation application, help you get ahead of any potential development items that need to be part of that project that you just know are something that are really unique and that would not be met out of the box.
Yeah, you're only going to be asked for it during planning on your next project, and it'd help if you have it, for sure. And especially you have the opportunity as you go through and find things, are they being used? Should you retire things too? Get it out of there so that you don't have that complexity where you're trying to figure out, do we need it or not down the road?
Sure. So your analysis, Ken, has surfaced a number of key challenges, but I see that you also offer some solutions. Let's take a look at those. So information gathering and analysis is the basis for sound decision making. What data should clients seek out and document at this point, beyond what we've just spoke about?
Right. So I would suggest off the bat, one is take a look at the compatibility matrix. And there you'll be able to find what the latest releases are and how the various components fit together. And that way, how far you can go with it, right? Then I would take a look at what you have, what's your current state, and then do a comparison, right? How far off are you? Are you not supported anymore? Or are you getting close to be not supported? And then, just identifying what components of the ecosystem you're going to need to update, right? The have-tos, right? Not necessarily, oh, this would be nice, right? Because you may not want to update everything. But, one thing I would first look at, obviously, is the operating system, right? So if you're on Windows, that drives a lot because you're not going to be able to update Infor to, the latest release, without 2019. And you're not going to upgrade a 2012 R2 server to 2019. It's a reinstall, right? So there's some decision making there. If you're on a Unix flavor, especially like AIX, so if you're lucky enough you're on 7.2, you have a technology level update to do, and you could do that in place. And usually the worst cases, you have to probably redo Bouncy Castle in your OS JDK and WebSphere, right? After you apply the update, because Java is going to probably get updated in that technology level release. Yeah, so in terms of the other components, you just determine what's the must-haves, right? And then what are the dependencies, and just come up with that list. And the end of service states, identify what those are, right? Determine too, what you're thinking is, okay, I'm going to be on LSF till a certain date. Also include the time it's going to take you to move to your new solution, whether it be CloudSuite or another enterprise solution, as Richard said earlier, right? And that's going to be the date you need to support LSF through. And then you look at the end of service dates to see if they're in line with that date. And if they're not, then there's updates to be done, and then you have to go down that path. And then we talked about analyzing the rice inventory a little bit earlier, identifying all your integrations, reporting too, right? If you're going to CloudSuite, if you plan to, you have options to use Burst or the analytics with LSF10. You could get a jump start on that, learn the tools, and then all the stuff that you've developed within Burst and analytics can just carry over to CloudSuite. It's interchangeable. So you're not developing something that you're just going to throw away. You can keep that with you because of the data modeling and so forth. It's not specific to like columns and tables, right? So it's a data model that then will just get applied to the business classes in the new solution, if that's the direction you're going to go. So that's I don't know if there's anything you want to add there, Leigh, but.
I think that's an interesting thing you pointed out with the reporting of being able to sort of get ahead of that move. Obviously, there's a lot of information to look at here and compare against Infor's Infor documentation. Once you have all the information that helps you with your to-do list, and then from there we can build out a roadmap. Or a project plan of what things need to be updated in what order. Here you've got a sample roadmap available. Would you like to just give us a quick overview of what this means?
Sure. Yeah. So this is kind of what I was rambling through a little bit on the previous slide. So in this case here, we're looking at platform first, right? So if you decide you want to go to the latest system foundation, which is usually the first point of updates. You got to look at where are you, right? Are you on Windows? Are you on Unix or whatever? So dependent on the OS requirement for 10 or 11.3 in this case, you'll have to make a decision there, right? Am I doing an in-place update? If I'm Windows, I'm just going to do a full migration, new install, or whatever. Along with that, as you notice, I have like components like Java, WebSphere, Perl, Mingle, of course, and then Portal, stuff like that, ISS. And then the database, right? Database updates. So if you're on SQL Server, you may want to just go to 2019, right? Which you can put on a Windows 2019 server. If you're on Oracle, looks like 19C is going to be the direction. I wouldn't go 18 at this point. I would go directly to 19C. Now Oracle will support that on Windows 2019, by the way, if you're Windows for some reason, or you could throw it on Linux or whatever. And then once we get beyond kind of our decision making on system foundation and the database levels, then we're talking about Landmark. And as I mentioned earlier, right now it's Windows 2016. I don't know what's going to, they may decide to up it to 2019. We're not sure yet. But there's a certain level runtime you need to be on. So you got to take a look at the compatibility matrix when you're ready to see what's going to be required there. And then I mentioned LDAP-S. You definitely want to get that configured. And I would do that prior to ADFS if you haven't done that already, and obviously ADFS is next. Now, for ADFS, just so you know, the latest LSF does support ADFS 5. And that ADFS 5 can be installed on Windows 2019. So if we're talking about, you know, extending the life of our LSF system, that may be a direction you want to go. And then Infor OS, so a lot of you on Mingle 11, we talked about this already, March this year. 11's no longer going to be supported on-premise. So you got to go to Infor OS 12. That's going to require a license swap with Infor, so keep that in mind. And I would suggest doing it sooner than later, even if you're not planning on making this move right away. It takes time for that license swap. I just want to give you, that's what we've experienced. And that's okay, as long as you plan. And with this, it does support authenticating using third-party IDPs like Azure, Okta, EDFS, etc. And then from Infor OS, you know, obviously you get to your desktop updates, and then if any of you are on MSCM, version 11.2.15 is now supported with the latest LSF. So that's just kind of a picture of what we would do. So we would lay this out for you after we review your environment, you know, if you want to bring us in to help with this. And then we would identify the roadmap and then determine the dependencies and then discuss with you what do you have going on for initiatives. IT security, you know, what are the considerations we need to think about from an IT security standpoint. You know, everything we talked about. We could line it out here, and then we put this into a project plan, timeline, and then work through it. So.
All right. Great. This certainly looks like a helpful a helpful tool for organizations to plan their next few years and keep an eye on what's coming out next. Certainly a valuable service you've got here. Let's talk about some other action items that clients should consider at this point. It is inevitable that the Lawson platform comes to an end. How can organizations prepare for that eventual migration to something new, whether it's Infor or another enterprise system?
Yeah, so there's a lot of considerations when it comes to like data and so forth.
And archiving that data, right?
And archiving and all that.
It's not typical when you move to a new ERP system to bring, you know, all of that history. I mean, for some organizations, that's 20 years. So, you know, they might want to make that available.
Yep. So the challenges you will have will come eventually if you don't address it during your conversion process to your new solution. Okay. So, you know, master data, transactional data, how clean is it? You know, have you profiled your data recently to determine, you know, how clean is it? You know, are there key columns for whatever reason not populated or not populated quite the way you should have them? That could cause problems when you're going through a mapping exercise and probably a transformational type of project where you're doing a lot of changes to master data and so forth, and you're trying to fit your historical data into this new way of life for you in your new system.
We've definitely seen that with our CloudSuite migrations because you know, the CloudSuite data structures are just a lot more restrictive than what you know, in terms of enforcing valid data compared to Lawson. We also you know, see that the use of the Infor data migration factory that's certainly works much smoother when you have quality source data coming in, and there are a number of prerequisite activities suggested to clean up and validate that data. There also are system updates that are required to use that migration tool. So you need to be in a good position to be able to apply those updates. There are prerequisites to the updates that, if you're on a really old Lawson platform, you might find that that creates a bit of a domino effect to get up to the level required just to begin using the migration tools.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. I didn't even consider that one. So
yeah. Okay, you mentioned Infor Analytics previously. The idea that you can start moving over to a new analytics platform now, and then that would put you in a good position to shift the enterprise application because there's this intermediate data model. So what is that? How does that work?
Yeah, it's like a metadata layer, so if folks are familiar with business objects or something like that, you have a middle tier layer that provides, your columns or objects in a friendly way to your users, so they can, automatically select these objects and build reports or dashboards or what have you. And all of the business rules, algorithms, calculations and all that, the measures are already configured behind the scenes. So someone's not going to need to understand relationships between tables or have a good understanding of SQL so that they get back valid results when they run queries and so forth. So kind of like that BOE type of thing. So with analytics, this is basically on top of this data model where you have out of the box, whether it be reports, dashboards, what have you, built with tools like Burst that you can just take advantage of immediately. Now, they have these for LSF V10, so they spent a ton of time building these models and mapping them to the system foundation tables, columns, and so forth. They've also done that with the new FSM and HCM solutions within Infor CloudSuite. So basically, if you're going to migrate to CloudSuite, those same analytics, dashboards, reporting that are out of the box that are delivered by Infor are going to be available to you within CloudSuite. So as you do the migration and the mappings and all that, and you have your historical data within CloudSuite at that point, you'll be able to get this almost the same look and feel, in terms of the reporting and dashboarding there. So that's why I'm saying it's not a waste of time if you want to start working with these tools and providing your internal customers with access to this type of information, especially if you're going to be 5 years out, right, before you go into your next solution, give them the ability to take advantage of some of the latest and greatest stuff from Infor. And it allows you to align, with Infor's strategic direction, and, you get to learn the tools so that when you get to CloudSuite, if that's your direction you're going to go, that's something you don't have to learn. You're done with that. There's going to be plenty of other things for you to focus on during that project.
Great. Sounds like a great way for organizations to start making some progress on moving to a next generation analytics model, on top of the enterprise application that's already in place. So before we get into some Q&A, we've reviewed a lot of challenges here that are facing Lawson support teams. We've presented some solutions. Ken, where does the RPI managed services offering fit in here?
Yeah, so I've laid some breadcrumbs earlier in this presentation too, but pretty much we can help you do the tech assessment, right, of your Lawson ecosystem, identify all the components, versioning, and so forth, and then do the analysis for you on, okay, what would be the approach to get to a supported level of LSF, landmark, and so forth in your ecosystem. We can go over with you the dependencies. We can work with your IT security team, right, and talk through some of the security challenges you may be having and so forth. So we could certainly advise and help plan those updates, and then we can certainly help execute. And especially in managed services, that's what we do. We execute on maintenance. You know, we have a monthly plan that we put in place. We do regularly scheduled maintenance, but then we also have, you know, special initiatives where you have something like, yeah, Mingle 11's no longer going to be supported in March. What's our plan for Infor OS? And what are we going to do? You know, stuff like that. So we can help work through you on that. We also do like proactive health checks. So if you're on an older version of LSF, we can, you know, provide proactive assessment, you know, work on a regular basis to make sure things are working as expected. We can be reactionary if you are hitting performance issues. It may be an update that you recently made, or just something came out of nowhere, right? Obviously, there was a change somewhere in your the IT infrastructure or whatever. We can help troubleshoot that because we deal with many different types of OSs, different versions of LSF, you know, landmark, so forth. We're dealing with CloudSuite now. So, you know, we have a lot of knowledge, subject matter experts, depending on your need. So we can certainly help there too.
Great. Yeah, and I know that a number of our clients are clients that have moved away from Lawson as their primary business applications. Yet it's critical that those applications, that Lawson is still up, and as sort of the organizational focus moves away, our services are able to sort of scale up and fill those gaps. So right. I think that this is an offering that is going to be very valuable to the Lawson community over the next few years.
And we talked earlier, Leigh, about data and historical data and the possibility of archiving. So, you know, what we're finding now are folks that are moving to CloudSuite and decided not to move all their historical transactional data over. They now have this on-premise system. What do? Right? We need access to the data for a certain amount of time that we didn't bring over. You know, do we keep LSF up, which I feel is very expensive proposition to have for a front end to a archive database? You know, what are the options? And there's, you know, a number of options that are out there. You know, possibly, do you want to load that up to your CloudSuite? Do you want everything up there for whatever reason? You know, do we use data lake? And use replication sets or whatever, bring it down to a warehouse or whatever, you know. You have to consider, you know, access to it, security to it, and how do you store it and maintain it. So
great.
Just another aspect we could talk about.
Okay. Well, on that note, let's open it up to some questions. Right. Ken and I are happy to take your questions. Do please use the Q&A feature here in On24, and we'll take them as they come in. We also phoned a friend. We're happy to have Carl C. and Sherry Brewer on the line to help us with any super technical questions. The first question we have here is in regards to the certificate requirements for LDAP-S. Hey, Sherry, you've done a number of LDAP-S projects. Can you shed some light on that?
Oh, sure. Yeah. For the LDAP-S, there's 2 certificates required. One required from the AD server. It can be a wildcard server, or wildcard cert from the server, or it can be an actual certificate from the domain controller. And then there's also a certificate required for the ADLDS, and also can be a wildcard certificate as well. The format for the ADLDS has to be in a PFX format, and then the other one really doesn't matter. So so that pretty much is the main requirement, is the two separate certificates. And a lot of people don't realize that it actually does, you know, require one from the AD and one from the ADLDS.
Okay, it's great information. Thanks. The next question I have here is regarding a topic I don't think we did address through the first hour, and that is Smart Office. Hey, Ken, what should clients need to what do clients need to know to maintain Smart Office going forward? That's a question here. Is you know, what about Smart Office? Is that going to stay supported?
Yeah, yeah. So with LSF 10.2 is supported. I think you have to be minimum 1009. And that it's required also with you know, some flavor of IPA 10.1.1 or above. You know, I know a lot are on 11 already, so that doesn't matter. But it references Windows Server 2012 still, so there has been no updates to, like, you know, 2019 or all that. So we'll have to keep an eye out on that. And then of course it would be the same for AIX 7.1 or 7.2. As far as we have right now, I know, you know, obviously Smart Office is going away when folks go to the CloudSuite applications.
Right. Right. Okay, great. Thanks. And then next question I have here, I'm not sure who's the best to answer this, so just jump in, whoever's feeling punchy on this one. If WebSphere is upgraded to 8.5.5.147, do we still need Java 1.8?
I think there might be an extra number in there, but yes, I believe.
I was wondering. It's 2 digits at the final.
It's probably 17.
17. Okay, yeah.
Yes, I don't remember if it's the base 855, but somewhere in that 855 structure, it does require the Java 1.8 update.
And we did mention earlier today that, well, a couple things. One is that 1.7 will no longer be supported after, I think, July 2022. And if we go back to the LDAP-S thing, Sherry, you found that performance-wise, right, we needed to at least be on 16 for LDAP-S to perform well.
Right, that's the Infor recommendation, and yeah, it has made a difference, so that's for sure.
So Java 1.8, that's been, Infor has been asking clients to move to that for a number of years. I remember there was a big push a couple of years ago. Now, even Java 1.8 is a little long in the tooth at this point. I mean, I know Oracle is pretty much, you know, isn't putting any more updates out on 1.8. But is that something that clients should worry about, that, you know, the Java version is so stagnant, and would switching over to Amazon Corretto help mitigate that, since that's a more actively developed project?
I don't know, Carl, if you want to take that one.
Yeah, I think Infor is definitely behind the curve a little bit as far as their Java requirements. We've definitely been seeing more and more clients recently that are concerned with the Java update. even though most clients are going to be totally internal and not exposed to external, I think security is raising to the top of everyone's mind lately. I would expect to see with LSF now supporting the Credo JDK8, I think we'll see Infor accept higher versions of that on a more recent basis. But again, like you said, I'm not sure I would expect too much for the Oracle JDK8 versions.
And I would add to that folks that are on Windows, you would need to get to 2019 with the latest LSF. And the other concern is on Landmark, we've yet to hear, and we mentioned this earlier, Richard, that Landmark, there's nothing in the matrix right now that says that it supports Windows 2019 yet. So we're going to wait to hear on that.
Yeah, good points. I mean, to me, it seems like almost like a glaring inconsistency in the differences there in the Windows versions. And, if I were planning moving my environment forward in Windows operating systems, I would definitely want to open a support case with Infor, just getting some written clarification, both on what is supported today and what their anticipated direction is over the next few months. Always better to have it in writing from support than conjecture from, a bunch of consultants. Here's a really great question here. If a client has dropped Oracle support, is it worth it to do a database migration over SQL Server? And what's the experience of clients who have done that, taken that path? What do you guys think? Is it if you're running Oracle without support from Oracle, is that a risk? And is it a risk that sort of makes it worth doing a database migration? I mean, how complex would a database server migration be? Oh, you know what? I think also what comes into play here is what is the compatibility, because you can't run LSF on AIX with SQL Server, right?
That's
like 4 questions in one, so feel free to chip away at any of them.
Yeah. Well, I think we have, Carl, go ahead if you had any projects where you migrated folks from Oracle to SQL.
Yeah, I think we've done the Oracle to SQL a bunch of times. That's kind of been my specialty, actually. But it's mostly with a platform migration. Unix to Windows or Linux to Windows. But I believe you're right. I don't think that the LSF on Unix would support SQL Server. I don't think it has that compatibility. So that would be another consideration. On general, if you're for some reason running Windows with Oracle, then yeah, I think it would be worth it. I think it would be within a reasonable amount of hours and costs compared to not having support at all on Oracle, in my opinion.
Great.
Yeah, and certainly when we're talking about Oracle, if you're sticking with Oracle, let's say 19C is definitely the version you're probably going to want to aspire to. And on the matrix, 19C, if you're going to move to 2019, you wouldn't need to be on LSF 11, 10.011 update 3. And 2012, you just need to be on 11 CU1 is the minimum. If you go on that way. And then you were talking about what, Unix and using SQL as a backend?
Well, the question wasn't specific about the operating system. I just thought I would bring that up.
Yeah.
The trend seems to be that Infor has reduced the overall number of combos between operating system and database that they support, which I think makes sense because it was pretty sprawling,
Yeah.
In years past.
Yeah, I don't see anywhere, let's call it AIX, right, or Red Hat. I don't see anything referencing SQL Server in the compatibility matrix. It's all Oracle, what I see, or DB2.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Ken, you had mentioned Infor Analytics and sort of bringing that up while still on Lawson. Which version of Lawson is required for Infor Analytics?
Let's see. So I guess there's the 10.0 and the 10.1 flavor for on-premise. 10.0, actually, if I'm looking at it now, both of them do support 2012 R2 or Windows 2019. And then, the run of the databases, so SQL Server, 2012, 2016, 2019. I'm sorry, not 2012, 2016, 2019, and then Oracle 18C and 19C. And you need to be on System Foundation 10.09 or higher. So it looks like they're referencing Windows 2019 too. So if you're using Lawson Analytics, you have a path.
Good to know.
Yep.
All right, great. Are there any other questions? Do feel free to drop them in the Q&A section here. I want to thank Carl and Sherry for joining us for the final few minutes here to tackle some of these topics. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Okay, great. Well, there's no more questions coming in, so with that, we'll wrap it up. Thanks, everybody, for joining us today. Thank you, Ken, for putting all this information together. If anybody has any questions that occur to them tonight, over the weekend, next week, feel free to drop us a line anytime. Always happy to talk through this stuff. Thanks. Bye, everybody.